write a love letter like Victor Hugo? Why would you want to write a love letter like him? He wrote some of the most influential things ever. He wrote Les Miserables, and he also wrote The Hunchback of Notre Dame, which Disney turned into a movie, and I've watched a lot of times. It is so heartbreaking, but it is so well done. Look, you'll have professionals talk about the professional analysis of it, but just on a feeling basis, it is such a good representation of feeling like the outcast and actually being the outcast and actually being very different, and the uncomfort that comes with that. But uncomfort is almost too small of a word for the feeling he encapsulates so well, which I would argue is a lot of writing. Not all of it, but a lot of it is just explaining the things that everyone feels already anyways. Because so many people are speechless and or speaking too much without actually finding the right words, without actually explaining what's happening. And that is what writers sometimes can do, is hand them not a script, but a word and a sentence for what is already there. It's almost getting a map to your own internal feelings. So I'm either gonna have, or it already has been put out, how to enter your romantic era, because there was an era in history that was called the Romantic Era, and I think we are in need of that era, even if it's not on a global scale within your own life. I think we started tippy-toeing into it with romanticizing your life, but I think we need to full launch the romantic era in your life. But go check that out. So now we're going to talk about how to write love letters like him, because he wrote quite a few. He wrote quite a few of everything. We're going to give you a small introduction to him, and then we'll get into it. He was born February 26th in 1802 in Bescan, France. He died May 22, 1885. So he died at the age of 83 in Paris, France. Also, he's an old poet. They don't tend to live that long. It is ridiculous how short artists and poets tend to live, for the fact that they're not doing jobs that are fatal. It's not like a soldier. With a soldier, you're like, yes, makes sense. But what, the pen, I don't know, got in your eye? Like, there's very few scenarios where writing is fatal, if ever. And so it's very interesting to see that evolve, and that he was a long-living poet, which is rare, and also a successful one, which is also rare. He was the figurehead of the Romantic movement, and he had a mistress for 50 years. So he is very emotional. If you are an emotional man, or if you're just more emotional than the average, because like a full-on emotional man versus like more emotional than the average are two very separate things. But if you're more emotional than the average, then this might be the love letter you want to write, because he is more emotional than the average man. I would say he's more emotional than Byron. And Byron and him are set in the same historical time, in the Romantic era, but Byron is very others-focused. It's not that Byron is not selfish, Lord Byron. It's that he's very interested in the other, whereas he's very interested in how he feels with the person. Not that Byron has no interest in that, but in their writing styles you can see that Byron, I've given this example before, but it bears repeating, Byron is looking you in the eyes. Oscar Wilde is looking down at you. And Franz Kafka is a little bit like running away from you and running away from love. I mean, he had 2 engagements that never went through, and then had a pen pal relationship that was basically a whole book of letters of love letters back and forth, but only met her twice, and she was married. I mean, they're all kind of a little bit of a mess. But his mess is that he's emotional, and he is very ridiculously focused on how he feels. I mean, that makes sense for the time, but then again, you can compare him to Byron as well, and Byron is much more looking you in the eye, whereas Victor Hugo, I would say he's much more looking at himself. He is a little bit I have a poem about this. The person who is looking at you to just see themselves in your reflection, that kind of person. Because the Romantic era is also known for its individuality and individualism, and it veered into selfishness quite quickly, but doesn't every movement veer into extremes quite quickly, unfortunately? But that's kind of the vibe of it. But it's interesting to see those two compared, because even that plays out differently. So, his poems and his writing style in love letters evokes emotion. And you're like, don't they all? Some evoke flattery, some evoke being understood. Lord Byron, I've talked about him ad nauseum in the actual video, and I loved it. But and he has his faults. He's not a great person. He really is not a great person. But what Lord Byron does well in his writing is he makes you feel seen. Whereas Victor makes you want to feel something with him. The response that he gets to his love letter, which we'll get into in a second, is, I love you, my Victor. I cannot recite it too often. I can never express it as much as I feel it. I recognize you in all the beauty that surrounds me in form, in color, in perfume, in harmony, sounds. All of these mean you to me. That's an emotional reaction. And the emotional reactions usually come from emotional actions. Someone professing their love and then someone professing back. Whereas all of the other ones are much more restrained and are either looking down and being like, I really care, and explaining the care. Or like Lord Byron, looking at someone and seeing all of them with their complexity, and someone feeling very understood and seen and present and important, which is why Lord Byron is the master of causing obsession, especially in the time he was born. Women didn't have jobs yet, they didn't feel very important, they were so in their routine, and then he comes along and makes them feel important, and the routine is out the window, and he really was appropriate for his time. Appropriate is maybe not the right word, but he was very... Go watch the Lord Byron video. There's a reason there was a whole video about it. Throughout his poetry, what we can learn and how you can write a love letter like Victor Hugo would be, it is worth suffering through love, for love. That is his general feeling you get with him, is the emotionality and the suffering, and that it's worth it. He's a romantic through and through, he's a dramatic through and through, he's an individualist through and through, which we'll get into point 3 about his individuality and why that matters in his love letters. But he believes in love in all of its entirety. There's people who believe in love in the beauty of it, and there's people who believe in love in the pain of it, but he believes the love is worth the pain because it has beauty. If I were to give you the other people that we talked about, Lord Byron believes in the beauty. He doesn't really much believe in the pain. Every time something gets difficult, he's like, peace out, adios. And Oscar Wilde much more believes in pain, but not as much as Franz Kafka. I mean, Kafka is just believes in pain, basically. In general, but I think that always translates to love as well, because what's more heartbreaking than heartbreak? What's more sad than heartbreak? And these juxtapositions, whereas he is kind of in its entirety. It's almost like, really interesting example, like some countries will have fat-free yogurt, some countries will have sugar-free this, and then the French or this will be like, I'll eat the fat, I'll eat the sugar, but I'll eat less of it. It's kind of like that. I'll feel the feelings, I'll be in pain, but at least it will be the real thing. That's kind of his vibe. 2, there is no greater purpose to love than love itself. He is very much an individualist. He is way more in his own head, in his own feelings, very similar to how we are now, in the sense of when people talk about love, it's, first of all, people talk about love and relationships linked, which I think is not that linked. It is hopefully linked, but it's not always linked. Anyways, I digress on that point. He is an individualist. How do you make me feel? How do I make you feel? The feelings of it. It's just there. It's just now. That's the only purpose. I don't believe he's religious. I also don't know. I also didn't look into the religiosity of any of them, except Kafka, because that was important to his identity crisis that never ended. Anyways, he's an individualist through and through. So he will talk about how he feels. and how you make him feel. So if you would write like him, so far, let's combine point number 1 and point number 2. You would talk about the suffering you feel for the love. Is it long distance, and the distance feels like it is wrapped around your body and restraining you? That's a good line. You can use it. You're welcome. And does it feel like you're being held back by the distance? Time difference. Do you feel like you're in different places and time? Do you really feel the time difference, not just in the logistical of like there's a time difference, but in the metaphorical of you're ahead of me, or I'm behind you, or I'm ahead of you and you're behind me? Just really feeling it, feeling the suffering, and most of all describing the suffering, and wrapping it up, these things, with the sense of it's worth it, because the feeling on the other side, the other feeling, the thing that it's codependent on, the actual feeling, the thing is love, and that is worth it. That's worth all the suffering. But to say it's worth all the suffering, unfortunately, you must explain the suffering. Point number 3, which will be backed up by a love letter he wrote, is he is not cautious. He's not cautious with love, he's not cautious with feelings, and judging by how he wrote the Notre Dame book, he was not cautious with anything. His writing is honest, which is a through line through all of the love letter tutorials all the time. I've said this 1,000 times, I'll say it 1,001. A love letter is honest. I genuinely feel, and I know because I've seen it, I think this is what confuses a lot of people about socializing. People prefer an honest insult than a fake compliment. They do. Now, don't go around insulting people for no apparent reason, I'm not saying that. But people prefer being seen than being lied to. So much over. And if the insult is you seeing them for who they are, it works much better than a lie that's not true. So much better. So point number 3, he is not cautious. This is what he writes in the love letter. Ne doute pas, parce que tout mon cœur que me le dit. Je suis Prosit, Manet, Excel, séparé de moi, pauvre. Rentre, frappé au cœur et pour honte quand je me tourne vers toi. Il me semble que je vois le bon qui me sourit. Si tu parles français, tu vas dire. Oh. I had French class a long time ago. My first couple of years were in French school, but I don't read it regularly, so that was a little shaky, but better than nothing. I'll give you the translation because I wanted to read it in its original language, which is, do not doubt it, because my whole heart tells me so. I am exiled, banished, separated from my own, poor, wandering, struck to the heart, and yet, when I turn, it seems to me that I see the good God smiling at me. He's bold, he's an emotional man, and he's honest. You can be like Byron, you can be like Oscar Wilde, you can be like John Mayer, you can be like Franz Kafka. The only thing you can never be in a love letter is a liar. Never. On 10,000 grounds. First of all, first ground, morality. But on the second ground, it doesn't work. It does not work. People know themselves. And even if they don't know themselves, the second they read it to somebody else and they're like, I don't think they're describing you, I think they're describing somebody else, it's over. Okay. So if you want me to give you some notes on the love letter, you can leave it in the comments and I can give you some notes on it and ask you some questions of things I think you should add. And I hope you enjoyed. Go check out all the other ones. If maybe Victor Hugo is interesting to you and you want to read his books, but he is not the one you want to write like. You're not an emotional man, you want something more stoic, you want something more expressive, you want something different. There's tons more on the way and already here, and leave a comment if you have a poet you would like me to do next. Bye, and don't forget to check out all of my books.